Hi everyone, it's time for Friday Farsight. I'm your host Sheldon Picotti, and this week we're going to talk about when global warming will be solved. So this is another one of those topics where I really appreciated a sober, long-term AI view of the problem, because this is one where if you try to understand the science or the future from popular media, or just whatever's out there to find if you go searching on the internet or something, it's just so full of noise and really extreme sides of the debate talking past each other. So it's a serious problem. There are many concrete things going on that I think would make great headlines and topics. I'm sure these have been covered, but they kind of come and go. So like the pine beetles in the Rockies, which if you saw them when it was going on about a decade ago, I guess, you just saw whole mountainsides that were orange because these beetles had spread to elevations where they weren't normally at and killed all the trees. You have the bleaching of the coral in the oceans. You have the potential reversal of the Atlantic current, which could drop temperatures in parts of Europe like 40 degrees in the winter. So, it's a very serious topic, and there's lots of interesting science around it. But you hear these crazy headlines, so I just will throw some samples out there. It's kind of from my side of the debate, but here's kind of how things sound from the liberal side sometimes. So from PBS, when will extreme heat become unlivable? From Salon.com, heat is making our planet uninhabitable. Why isn't this the top story around the world? From CNN, heat is testing the limits of human survivability. Here's how it kills. So you see stuff like this, and every time there's a big thunderstorm or hurricane or something, there's the second headline beneath it is, how did global warming cause this storm? So, you can see why the other side of the debate is irritated, and then vice versa. Now, heat is a killer, of course. It's actually the largest weather-related cause of death, in the US at least, where 1,500 people die every year from heat. And 600 of them are in Phoenix. And so it's a lot of people, but I think Phoenix is a good case study for how we might deal with extreme heat, because they're dealing with 115, 120 degree weather in the summer, and mostly it's okay because they have air conditioning and they have water supplies and all that stuff. Clearly there are vulnerable populations like the elderly, the homeless, etc., but that's a problem we can solve. So I think that I can't solve the problem with mass media, but hopefully this little prediction that we'll go into now will be somewhat of a breath of fresh air. Maybe it's a little bit too dry and sober for some folks, but it takes the long view, and I know that currently maybe it may feel like we're backsliding on making progress on global warming, but I do think humanity, bumps and stumbles their way along to the right answer eventually. We're always like toddlers learning to walk, and I know we're taking some steps back. In my own state, we've had a coal plant ordered to stay open just because we like coal. But I think that the overall demographic trends and, gradual spread of knowledge will hopefully take things in the direction that this prediction says. So without spoiling too much more about it, I think I'll hand it on over to our AI hosts, Biff and Betty. Reminder that this content is AI generated, so don't trust it 100%. There may be slight errors here and there. Take it away, guys.
Thanks, Sheldon.
What you got, Biff?
Wow, okay, so this one really got me thinking for our Friday Farsight episode this week, Betty. Imagine this. Global warming effectively solved.
I know, right? It's like you hear that and your brain it screeches to a halt because for so long the narrative has been so doom and gloom. But the prediction from Strategic Farsight says by 2075, plus or minus 15 years, global warming will be effectively solved. It's a huge, huge claim.
So, what does solved even mean in this context? Does it mean we're back to, woolly mammoths roaming around and ice sheets everywhere?
Well, that's what the article delves into, right? It's not a complete return to pre-industrial conditions, which it says is likely impossible within any meaningful time frame. Instead, solved here means global temperatures will stabilize, then begin a downward trajectory. We'll have net negative carbon emissions globally, and society will have successfully adapted to the unavoidable climate impacts that are already, well, locked in.
So it's less total reset and more crisis averted, future managed. I get it. That's a much more realistic, though still pretty mind-blowing goal. But how, Betty? How do we actually get there from here? What's the grand plan?
Okay, so the path to resolution, according to the article, starts with achieving net zero emissions. Think of it as a huge, huge stepping stone. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, their reports talk about limiting warming to 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius, and that means getting to net zero CO2 emissions around 2050 or 2070.
That's still, decades away. And haven't we already pledged to do that? I feel like I've heard 2050 a lot.
We have, Biff. Most major economies, they've actually pledged net zero targets between 45 and 60. China's aiming for 60, and the US, EU, and the UK are all targeting 2050. But here's the kicker. The Climate Action Tracker noted in 2023 that current policies still have us on track for about 2.7 degrees of warming by 2100.
Oh, dear. So we're pledging, but we're not quite, doing.
Exactly. So bridging that gap is the critical challenge. It means we need accelerated action, especially in the 2020s and 2030s. It's a transition from pledges to actual implementation.
Easier said than done, right? I mean, we already have the doom and gloom. What more do people need to start taking action? Please tell me it's not more sci-fi where all the coastal cities have flooded, and instead of moving to dry land, everyone starts paddling around in boats.
You sound a little bitter there, Beth. Is there a particular author you want to shame while we're on the air?
Hey, I'm no futurist. I don't pretend to know what's going to happen, but we've got the apocalyptic visions, right? Surely more of those aren't going to move the needle.
Well, what the article emphasizes most of all is technological acceleration, which is what really drives the resolution timeline.
That's the other kind of sci-fi vision, right? Where we invent just what we need, just in the nick of time. But someone's got to do the inventing, right? And buy the tech. And deploy it. As they say in Hollywood, what's my motivation?
It starts with trends already in motion, Beth, namely around the cost of green technologies. Ramez Nam's article in 2020 called Solar's Future is Insanely Cheap, which the prediction cites, shows that solar and wind power costs have plummeted like 90% and 70% respectively over the last decade. It's dramatically outpacing expert predictions. Battery storage, too. This is not just a little bit. It's a monumental shift.
I guess we've been at this for a while. Governments incentivizing green tech, and you have a point. It does seem to be paying off. It's like when DVDs first came out, they were $50, and now you find them in a bargain bin for $2.
Precisely. A report from the International Energy Agency entitled Net Zero by 2050 points out that most of the technologies we need for deep emissions cuts already exist. They need more development and, crucially, mass deployment. For example, by 2030, 60% of car sales need to be electric. And by 2040, half of heavy industry needs to use low-carbon processes that are only at the demonstration phase right now.
So we have the blueprints. We just need to, build Epcot. Do I detect a little wishful thinking here?
Well, the historical trend suggests clean energy will keep accelerating. MIT's Technology Review, the article mentions, notes that renewables follow these S-curves of exponential growth. Solar energy, for instance, has been doubling every 2 to 3 years in many markets. It's a pattern, know what I mean? Not just a wish.
Fair enough. You're making a case. But what about, getting rid of the carbon we've already dumped up there? Because even if we stopped everything tomorrow, the problem's still there, right? Like my cousin Roy, still sleeping on my couch after quitting his job in 2023.
And that, Biff, is where carbon dioxide removal at scale comes in. The article calls it perhaps the most challenging aspect of solving global warming, achieving net negative emissions. The National Academy's report from 2019 suggests we'll likely need to remove 10 gigatons of CO2 annually by mid-century. To give you context, our current capacity is measured in mere thousands of tons.
Thousands to gigatons. This doesn't get any easier, does it? That's not just a scaling challenge. That's sort of like the difference between making a stern speech at the United Nations and starting World War III.
It would be a massive, massive endeavor. But McKinsey's analysis projects the carbon removal industry could reach $1 trillion annually by 2050, covering both nature-based solutions like reforestation and soil carbon sequestration, and engineered approaches such as direct air capture or enhanced rock weathering. It's a huge industry in the making.
$1 trillion, huh? That's quite a bit of coin for tech you're never going to see on a shelf at Best Buy.
It is. And even with all that, the article emphasizes a significant climate system response delay. Even after emissions are reduced and carbon removal is deployed at scale, there's a serious lag. NASA's Earth Observatory explains it really well. Due to the thermal inertia of the oceans and other slow indirect effects, the Earth's climate will keep changing even if we stopped adding CO2 today.
So Mother Earth finally gives up smoking, but too late. Her teeth are yellow.
In a manner of speaking. Temperatures will keep rising for years after emissions peak, and things like sea level rise will continue for centuries. So, yeah, the symptoms persist. There's an unavoidable delay between the action and the result. But despite all this, the article concludes that 2075, plus or minus 15 years, is the most likely resolution point because of all these factors lining up. Clean energy's exponential growth, carbon capture technology maturing and being deployed, and finally, the climate itself, after a 10 to 20-year delay, achieving temperature stabilization.
That's surprisingly precise for something that feels so far off. But I've heard other takes, There are the super optimists who say we'll solve it by 2050, and then the total doomsayers who say it's unsolvable this century. How does Strategic Farsight's prediction address those views?
Great question, Biff. The article tackles both directly. For the techno-optimist view, like Tony Seba from Rethink X, who thinks renewables could just displace fossil fuels by the 2030s purely through economics, or Bill Gates's idea of solving it by mid-century. The article says that while technological progress will accelerate, this view underestimates institutional inertia, the lifespan of existing infrastructure, and geopolitical complications.
Yeah, governments and big corporations aren't exactly known for their lightning-fast agility or consistency, as recent events have shown.
Right, exactly. And even with rapid emissions reductions, the climate system's delayed response means temperatures would simply keep rising past 2050. So solving it by then is, well, it's not feasible given the planet's own timeline.
And the pessimists, the ones who say we're basically cooked this century, like Kevin Anderson, who argues we can't stay below 2 degrees Celsius without, immediate radical societal transformation.
The article acknowledges that perspective. It mentions Spratt and Dunlop's existential climate-related security risk from 2019, which suggested potential civilization collapse scenarios. And it says this perspective correctly identifies the enormous challenge. It really does. But it also it underestimates humanity's capacity for innovation under pressure and the accelerating pace of clean technology deployment.
So basically, we're not as fast as optimists think, but not as helpless as pessimists fear. Humanity can really pull it together when we have to. We've had pandemic responses, mobilized industries during wartime.
Absolutely. Those are perfect examples. Societies can transform quickly when they really need to. So the conclusion for Friday Farsight this week, Biff, is that global warming will likely be resolved through emissions peaking by 2030, declining rapidly through mid-century, and reaching net negative levels by the 2060s.
And then the temperature stabilization follows with that delay, probably around 2075, give or take 15 years.
Right, with warming being held to about 1.8 to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. It's a solution, not a total rewind.
Total Rewind would be a better movie.
Maybe so, but, real life is seldom so clean-cut, Biff. The likely future is that we avert the worst catastrophic scenarios and put Earth on a long-term cooling trajectory. But significant impacts, sea level rise, ecosystem changes, extreme weather, they will persist for generations, so we'll still need ongoing adaptation.
So I might get to paddle a canoe down Fifth Avenue after all. Cool. But first, we'll be in this decades-long process, this drawn-out battle that we eventually win. That's actually kind of hopeful in a weird way. Not immediate gratification, but a definite path.
It really is. It gives you a sense of, what we're working towards, the scale of the challenge, but also the possibility of success. And, well, that wraps up this episode of Friday Farsight.
Indeed. And remember, you can dig into the full article on this prediction and so many others over at strategicfarsight.com. There's a whole world of future possibilities waiting for you there.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week for another glimpse of the future.